I've said several times in the past, be careful what you believe or it might get you hurt. Well, it not only can get you hurt, it can even get you killed. And yet again, somebody posted a link to a web page of a certain individual that I will not mention names because he is definitely not the only one doing this kind of stuff, and it's basically spreading misinformation. And I want to talk about a couple of the things that he had a list of what he called truths, which I'm telling you, definitely were not truths. A few were, but won't get into which ones were and weren't. And I'm not even going to go through the whole list. But I'm going to talk about four different things that this particular individual brought up at different times. And one of them actually kind of proves that he doesn't know much and he's a bit of a hypocrite. And, well, based on what I've seen from his pictures and such, I don't think he's really had a whole lot of experience with horses, but because he has a website, published a book, has a few videos on his website, people think he's some kind of an expert and they will believe him. And this kind of thing will happen even with, say, somebody else at the barn that's had a horse for a number of years, and you think, well, they should know what they're doing. I'm going to take their word for it. If they tell me something, well, just because they got a horse doesn't mean they know more than you, or at least not much. I'll back up to one of the things that he said that I think kind of proved that he's a bit of a hypocrite. And part of what he said I actually agree with, but he said in one of his truths was, it's not what you use, it's how you use it. And he was using that statement in defense of certain things that he advocates. I can't remember exactly what all of them were. There's a couple of them. Doesn't matter. But I've said the same thing myself, and I agree with that. But this is the same individual that a while back also said there were certain things that he absolutely did not like and you should never ever use. Well, so much for not what you use, but how you use it, because he kind of contradicted himself there. One minute he's saying that, next minute he's saying absolutely not. So those are the kinds of things that I think you got to really worry about. It really shed the light that somebody's not being straight with you, or they really don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they believe it. Who knows? I'm not going to say one way or the other. But I do want to talk about a couple of things that he brought up in his list. I can't remember. I think it was something like 20 different items he mentioned, but there's only three that I'm really going to focus on because they're all quite closely connected. And, well, actually, the one wasn't even in the list, but it was something I've heard him say before, is that when it comes to personal space, when it comes to horses, that's not a natural thing. They don't understand it. That's why it's so hard to teach it. Well, that's actually a bunch of nonsense because it's completely natural to the horse. If you believe in the other two things that he says are absolutely not true. One is leadership, and the other one that he mentioned that was an absolute fallacy was hierarchy in a herd. Well, I'm not quite sure where he gets that notion, because if you watch any wild or domestic herd of any size, anything more than a half a dozen horses, it's very easy to see. It's not, you don't have to be really skilled to see the hierarchy and the leadership in a herd. If there's, if there's only a couple of horses, sometimes it's pretty hard to see. And it's not linear like you see with the human society is, the hierarchy is very linear. Whereas horses, it can actually be circular. And I've talked about this before, because the first time I encountered this, I thought that doesn't make sense. And then I read an article about it where it basically said exactly what I observed. And I observed it again later where, horse A would push on horse B. Horse B would push on horse C. So you figure the hierarchy is very clear, A, B, C. But then all of a sudden horse C would push on horse A, and it's like, whoa, am I losing my marbles here? Well, no. But if you understand that there definitely is a hierarchy and a leadership, and virtually every single species of animal, and including humans, I'm not sure why they think that horses are excluded from that. One of the comments that he did make said that the truth is that the horse will never ever see you as another horse. They're not that stupid. They're smart enough. They know you're a human. Well, I agree. But that doesn't mean that you cannot still be higher or a leader. Because there have been many examples, if you go on YouTube, I'm sure you could find thousands of them, where there are interspecies relationships. So just because you're not a horse doesn't mean you can't be a leader to the horse. Just because you're not a horse does not mean that you can't be higher than the horse. And if you do not believe in either the hierarchy or the leadership, then, well, that's why he would probably say something silly like, horses don't understand personal space. It's not natural to them, because if you get the hierarchy and the leadership thing going, the personal space thing becomes quite natural. And they will respect your personal space if you're higher than them, because if, like I said, anything more than a half dozen horses, if you go observe the behavior, a higher horse will easily go into the space of any other horse it wants. But a lower horse will absolutely never go into the personal space of a higher horse. That's how it works. And that same principle applies to virtually all species, whether they have a social group that is just a family, a herd, a pack, a band, whatever you want to call it, or whatever their social grouping is. There is leadership and hierarchy. And if you don't believe those things exist, well, then the personal space thing isn't going to work for you either. And, you're going to have a heck of a time enforcing it. And the reason I mention this stuff is because, I've heard it more than once. More than one person has said things like this. And if you do not have leadership and hierarchy in place, it can be very, very dangerous for you. It can become extremely dangerous. If you want to ask your horse anything, if you want it to do something, best case scenario, it's going to ignore you. It's going to go, why should I listen to you? You're not higher than me. You don't tell me what to do. Worst case scenario, it might bite you or kick you. And if it ever kicks you, one kick from even a small horse can kill you. So getting into an argument with a horse that doesn't have any respect for it because it doesn't see you as a higher horse, extremely dangerous, potentially life-threatening. So back again, be careful what you believe, please. Not all this stuff is really all that bad, but some of it, like I said, the leadership, the hierarchy, and the personal space thing, if you can't keep a horse out of your personal space, that can be dangerous. And if you don't have hierarchy or leadership in place, you're never going to get that personal space thing working. And if you ask the horse to do something, it's going to be very dangerous. One other factor, if you're not a good leader for your horse, and I read an article once, and just to, it wasn't written by some guy that, by the way, the guy that I heard say this, that listed this stuff, I have no idea what his credentials are, what experience he has, nothing. He never claims to have any kind of education or experience with horses, so possibly none, or very little. But I did read an article by a guy one time that was an actual certified brain surgeon, a neurologist, well-educated man that also happened to really like horses. Wrote an article about leadership, and he explained the importance of it is that by being a good leader, you are giving a horse what it needs. And one of the things that I've heard from many people is that a horse will get from a good leader is a sense of safety and comfort, which will in turn make them feel very calm. And if you can be a good leader to your horse, you'll have a calm, relaxed horse that will feel confident, that isn't going to freak out. If you're not a good leader, there's things that are going to happen, like ignoring the dangers that can happen if you don't have that hierarchy happening. Some of the things that can happen is the horse might spook, bolt, buck, rear, and just generally be a nervous, just a bag of nerves. And these are all things that are going to not only hinder your relationship with your horse, but like I said, can be absolutely dangerous. So please, I can't emphasize this enough. I've said all of this stuff before, but again, this guy, he's been on my radar for years. and still spewing things that are misinformation. And like I said, I'm not naming names because he's not the only one. There's a lot of people out there saying this kind of stuff, and it's potentially dangerous. And in extreme cases, it can even be life-threatening. So please be very, very careful of what you believe, okay? Have a good day.